Welcome to Art in the Empty Bowl, a feature of Empty Bowl Zendo in Morristown, New Jersey. Our guest today is Sensei Paul Schubert. Paul is a chemical engineer and educator and a longtime student of Zen. He's also an author and Sumi artist. A student of Roshi Kennedy's, Paul teaches at a number of Zendos in and around New York, where he and his wife make their home in Greenwich Village. Paul's been a longtime volunteer with the Fortune Society, which aids people who have been released from prison in readjusting to life on the outside and finding employment. He and his wife also volunteer every summer at Yosemite National Park, where they serve as guides and protect the bears from the tourists. Paul is the author of two books, Zen Entry Points, An Introduction to Zen, and Sumi-e Speaks, a book of his paintings accompanied by stories, reflections, and poems, his own and those of others in the Zen tradition. We'll be showing and talking about some of his work today. Okay, good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Ed.
And thanks for being with us on Art in the Empty Bowl.
Well, I'm looking forward to this talk.
Good. We're going to look at your work and your paintings and learn more about you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to start by asking you what led you to Zen Buddhism.
Well, that's a story that goes through yoga. You know, in the 80s, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, decided to take a hatha yoga class. And so we went down to the East-West bookstore. This was in the 80s. Yoga was completely different. It was more of a spiritual practice. It was in the basement of the bookstore, just a rug on the concrete floor. We did yoga. And at the end, we did meditation. I said, well, meditation is kind of the best part. And so, but this teacher was very good. So we kept with him. And then finally one day he said he was going back to India. And then he said something, he said, you know, they're looking for introductory teachers here. You and Peggy seem pretty interested. And we looked at each other and said, any place that would have us as a teacher, we don't want to be at.
Funny.
So we decided to look for more rigor. Well, Zen rhymes with rigor, right? So eventually we went to the Zen Mountain Monastery and got introductory. And then we started looking for teachers. We practiced at the Village Zendo for a number of years. And we only had two requirements, that they would take us and that they could speak English, which was kind of uncommon in the 80s. There weren't that many English teachers around, English-speaking teachers. But then eventually we heard that Bob Kennedy, now Roshi Kennedy, became a teacher in New Jersey. I was working in New Jersey at the time, living in New York City. And since he was at St. Peter's College, I could get off the train on the way to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and get back on the train and be at work on time. So I did that for 15 years.
Oh.
Eventually he made me a sensei, and now I'm teaching in New York.
Oh.
So it was a different yoga then, I tell you that.
So you got to spend time with Roshi Kennedy.
Well, at that time, Roshi Kennedy was just getting started. So Ray was actually a student at that time as well. But he came later in the day. I came in the morning. And for the first year, it was just he and I sitting together. I couldn't believe it, you know. And of course, now he has a huge following. But it was just fortuitous.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, you know, that was sort of his first generation of students.
And so, and it was many years later that you told me you woke up one morning and realized that you needed to study Sumi-e painting.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I woke up, you know, and I said, I'd like to do Sumi. Now, I didn't know really what Sumi was. You know, I had never done art. Even in my high school, we didn't have art as a small rural school. I studied engineering and science in college. So I had this idea that I wanted to practice Sumi. So same thing, I went off searching for a teacher. And the first place that I went to there's not that many teachers around, or real teachers. He said to me, he says, "What do you want to paint?" And I said, "I'd like to know how to hold the brush." Well, I could see this wasn't going to go anywhere. So I went back to searching around, and after I found out about Koho Sensei. Koho Sensei was in her 90s at the time. She had just given up her shop, which she had in Soho for about 35 years. She started the first Sumi school in New York City with her name, but she was teaching in her apartment. And to my amazement, she said, "I'll take you as a student." So in her 90s, up until she was 99, she's now 101, she lived in a fourth floor walk-up and walked up once a day.
Yeah.
So, but to go to her apartment was like going to a different country in a different time. And she'd be regally dressed, and there would only be 3 or 4 of us. So it was another case where I just sort of fell into a great situation.
So here she is at 101.
Yes, she's, yes. This article, there was an article in the Times a few months ago, what a Sumi teacher does on Sunday.
Yeah.
Co-host at she's now at Forest Hills. I still see her once a month. And there's 2 things we do. She looks at my paintings, and I bring her cream puffs.
It's a
And
good
she still walks. She's, she looks at the paintings and she gets younger on the spot. It's great. It's great.
What kinds of things does she say about them?
Well, we have this language. She looks at it and she says, "Well, it's not together," or, "There's not enough contrast." And then she says, "Otherwise, it's good."
Uh,
And so this is a whole class of paintings called otherwise paintings. But if I were to bring the same painting again, and she would make the same comments. And everyone, I mean, she's very constructive. She knows she's a true artist, and that's really what I needed. In art or in Sumi, there's technical people and there's artistic people. And since I had grown up on the technical side in science, she was just like a different world.
you told me that she learned Sumi in a Japanese internment camp.
Yeah, when she was a teenager during World War II, she was in California and they sent her to the internment camp. And they also sent Obata, Shiora Obata, who at that time was easily the most famous Sumi painter in the country for his work at Yosemite. He was also on the faculty at Berkeley, and he went to the camps as well. And, he really worked to improve life there for the people. And among other things, he started schools. And Koho was her best student, his best student. And when the war ended, she said they gave him a ticket to go anywhere they wanted. And Koho said, "I wanted to get as far away as possible." So she came to New York City. For a teenager who loved art, she had plenty of time to do it. And Obata, to his credit, he really had to give up his life as a faculty member. And he has some quotes which are in the book about, when there's adversity, pick up your brush and use it. No reason to complain. Just, express yourself through your art. And that's what she did. That's what he did. And they both have works in the Smithsonian from that era. One last thing I'll say about Koho, at the age of 101, which was last year, she had a show in New York in a gallery, and she was present at the opening. And all her students from decades were there. I see her once a month still. It's good. It's uplifting. Sometimes you see old people and they just bring you up, and that's how she is. We used to have birthday parties at our house, you know, because she lives in our neighborhood. And Peggy, my wife, asked her, Sensei, when's the best time of your life? And she says, right now.
In the book, you talk about the instructions that she gave you. I don't know if that's your summary of them or those are her literal instructions.
Yeah, well, you know,
Those,
what she would say different things. She would take, well, the first class, she put the brush in my hand and took my hand and guided it. She says to me, your wife won't mind, I'm an old woman. And the next thing she said is, do a bamboo leaf. And then she said, do 1,000 of them. Just, you know, and she showed me the stroke. And so for weeks, I just did bamboo leaves on newspaper. Because I was going to do 1,000. I did 1,000. And this was in total contrast to the first guy I met who said, what do you want to paint? So we did 1,000. And, you know, as I say in the book, every once in a while, one is special. And you know it's special even before the brush leaves the paper. So I did 1,000, and then I said, oh, call Sensei, I did 1,000.
and how do you know? You know by how centered you are or how where your energy is? Is that how you know it's going to be a good one?
Yeah, yeah, you know, because she's also saying other things. She's saying, you know, fast, but not too fast. Well, what's that mean? Well, it's kind of like in Zen. You have to do it to know what it means. Or move your arm and fingers and body all at once. These are the kinds of instructions that she gave. They weren't technical, but she would come and correct you. And then she would say, begin with nothingness so that each stroke is important. And the last thing she said is, you know, if someone calls a painting interesting, that's not a compliment.
Okay, I'll remember not to do that today.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last thing I'll say on that one, she says, polite is for people, not for art.
Ah,
Just go at it, and don't judge it and keep going. So,
right.
you know, those are the kinds of instructions that were so helpful at the beginning, you know, for a person like me.
Did you paint from life? Did you actually have bamboo there?
Okay, well, there's a couple of ways to do it. Sometimes I paint from things I've seen, particularly Yosemite we'll probably come to. And the other thing that happens a lot in Chinese and Japanese painting is you look at other works and use them as a starting point. You know, some you say, well, as Coho would say, you can improve on nature. You know, if you're doing a nature problem, sometimes you have to improve on it. But very often for myself, I look at a painting and I sort of get a feel for it. And then it turns out my own way.
Yeah. So so you've been practicing meditation and Zen a while, and then you took up Sumi, and did you notice some um, shift or difference in your practice from it?
Well, yeah, Sumi, you know, on a good day, Sumi is an extension of practice, you know, because it really requires being present. It requires, you know, kind of having an idea, but not being fixed to it. So, you know, it's
Hmm.
there's an emptiness to it, you know, in that, how do you say it? Let me think. You're manifesting some idea, but you don't know what that idea is. Okay. When I think of painting with an empty mind, what I really think of is being aware. What emptiness means kind of awareness and letting it manifest itself. You know, there's this great quote from Nagarjuna. It says, without emptiness, nothing is possible. With emptiness, everything is possible. So you bring that attitude, you know, that, okay, here comes something, I have a kind of a general idea of where I'm going, but I don't know where it is. And what shows up, just like that bamboo leaf kind of shows up periodically. Not every day is like that, just like not every sitting day is like that. But it's really about making your awareness manifest. You know, people sometimes say, got to be mindful. But mindful is a tricky word because a lot of people think it's something you do to focus. But what mindful is, at least to me, is just being aware of what's cooking and letting that awareness, allowing that awareness to manifest itself. There's one stroke follows another, but not consciously, you know, and you sort of say, not so good, And then time passes, and, you know, just like in sitting, you know, after you sit for a long time, you say, boy, I can't do this another minute. And that's the way it is with painting, you know, you can't get another good stroke out.
I noticed that sometimes you apply color and other times you don't. So I picked out a couple of slides where you have added color. For example, this one, which is, it's called, what is the name of this slide?
In nature.
Okay, good, yeah. And so you've added, I can see you've added a little color and also you've added a Buddha.
Yeah, I have them, I put them all in. Now, color came later for me, you know, when I was with Koho Sensei, we used one brush and just black ink. And when COVID came, you know, obviously I couldn't see her for a year or so. And, you know, so I took some online courses, and that's when I was introduced to color. Now, color is kind of intimidating to a person like me, you know, because I think of watercolors, but color here is more of a wash. And so, you know, you sort of see just some light wash colors here, and it just brings out the distance, see. So sometimes I use color, but I don't use color the way you would in watercolor. It's more of a wash. And actually, when I was taking this online course, you know, I really learned about the technical aspects, you know, different brushes, different papers, different inks. And for me, that was the right order to learn things, you know, to first learn the spirit of the art and then learn how to do more things. Because, you know, until I got some smaller brushes, you know, I said, how do people do this? You know, I didn't know they existed. But one thing I did learn, I'll just pass on, is, you know, when people start, you should start with a decent brush. You know, if you get a $2 brush, no matter how good a painter you are, you can't do anything. So, you know, even if you're just getting started, you say you don't want to spend a lot of money, spend $10 anyway.
Good brush.
And there's all sorts of papers, which I learned about that you can do that do different things. I have a stone here, which I'm showing, and you have a stick and you rub it against. You put it just a few drops of water and you rub it in, and that's how you make your black. The colors can either be out of tubes, or actually now you can get some that are kind of like your watercolor set. But they're different because you're on rice paper, so you can't just use any watercolor. Oh, by the way, rice paper has nothing to do with rice.
Oh, no? No rice in there?
It was just some mistranslation somewhere along the line.
Ah.
I just recently learned that.
Is this, you mentioned Yosemite, and is this particular painting from Yosemite?
I have some in the book.
Yeah.
This one is not. No, this one is the parable about the boat accident. That's what this represents.
Yeah, for the viewer, you can see the two little boats in there, which I assume they stuck them in at some point later. But
Yeah.
the parable is of the the guy who's boating and he's furious because some other boat rammed him, and then he finds out because he's in a dense fog, he didn't see that it was just an empty boat.
Yes, that's right. You started with the empty boat, so you got that one pretty good.
Nice painting.
So when I first painted this, there was one boat, but when I was making the book, I said, "Oh,
I want to show a few paintings in a row, and if you want to comment on them, sure. And otherwise, I'll just this one I believe is "Go to the Pine Tree," and there's a nice quote from Basho about this. Do you want to read it, or should I?
No, go ahead.
Okay, and that's on page. He writes, "Go to the pine tree if you want to learn about pine, or to the bamboo if you want to go learn about the bamboo. And in doing so, you must leave your subjective preoccupation with yourself. Otherwise, you impose yourself on the subject and do not learn."
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Just one thing about this painting, Koho Sensei really is from the Notan school, which emphasizes shades and dark. So you can see, you see in a lot of my paintings, you'll see that light mountain in the background. And that's one particular school of Sumi painting, which I love.
The characteristic is to have that sort of grayed out.
Yeah, the dimensionality, you can sort of fade it out. Sometimes when you really have a painting, people hold it this way to see if it's really three-dimensional.
Uh-huh. This one has a very nice balance to it. And there's this one, which I also liked a lot. Maybe I can make this a bit bigger. Oops, sorry if I'm distorting the. This one is hanging together, I believe.
Yes, hanging together. I can read that one. It says, "The world hangs together, but not by a thread. Nothing to hang it on, nothing to hang."
Well, that's pretty Zen.
Actually, I wrote that verse. It's one of the few verses I've wrote.
That's your verse. Nice.
But, what I liked about the painting, I've had the verse for a long time, and I forgot to put it in my first book. But when I saw a painting similar to this, I said, this is what this verse is. It just sort of fades with nothing hanging there.
Yeah, and the tree doesn't even seem rooted anywhere. It's all coming out of the formless.
I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't know. I mean, intuitively you see that, but I never articulated it before. I guess that's what the paintings do. You see what's there, and that's what's there. That's
Yeah. And sometimes you see what's not there.
And that's I got advice from a Zen teacher once. He says, "See what's there, don't see what's not there."
Uh-huh. But I mean, that is the kind of role of the imagination in a way, isn't it? And to be able to see what's not there. I'm sorry to contradict that.
Well, you manifest what wasn't there. That's true. Yes. Yeah, you don't know it's there because emptiness has infinite potentiality, and because we have senses, it's our ability to manifest that potentiality in our own way.
There's a really interesting aesthetic to the whole Sumi phenomenon. I've been kind of studying it and learning about it. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about, apart from the experience of your making them, there's my experience of viewing them, which shifts around a lot.
Yeah. I have a grandson. We had his first birthday this weekend, and we inscribed the inside cover of the book to him on his first birthday. And it said basically, people, you can read these stories and see these paintings, and they'll mean different things at different times. And the last sentence to him was, trust yourself, because your response is what counts. So, you know, they'll put it on the shelf, and maybe when he's 10 years old, he'll see it.
Yeah, or 20.
Or 20, yeah. It'll be different then again, right?
Yeah. This one I like, just a wonderful little sketch. I forget the title.
Uh, let's see which one. That's the bird that, there's a story there. You want me to tell it or not?
Yeah, sure.
Let's see what that bird is.
That's
So,
on.
a bunch of birds. I'm trying to find out which story that is.
Oh, this is the bird that escaped.
Quail. It's a
Yeah.
quail. So they're a quail, you know, quail are just, they're pretty communal birds. And one day a hunter came and threw a net over the quail, and he took them and put them in a cage. And he fed them every day, except for one quail who never ate. And as time went on, you know, he got skinnier and skinnier, and the other quail got fatter. But the owner came, or the hunter came and said, pulled him out and said, what's wrong with you? And the quail flew away. He escaped. And the other bird said, how'd you do that? He said, I did it because I didn't take his food, and now I'm free. And so that's the story.
I remember when I read that story, my first reaction was, well, that quail is not much of a bodhisattva. But there's other ways of looking at it. And one of them was just in terms of he remained really focused on what he wanted and on his freedom.
He wanted his freedom.
Yeah.
And well, he told the other quail what to do, but we'll see. It might be too, who knows? That's the story. The story is free as a bird's sky, the sky bird, blue sky bird. That's the name of that story, the blue sky bird. All he would do was look at the sky while the birds were eating.
So maybe he was more of a bodhisattva than I realized.
Well, first things first, I guess.
Right. This one's called Not Luck, a very nice. Yeah, this also has a nice verse from Stonehouse.
Stonehouse, yeah.
And that's who is Stonehouse?
Well, you read the verse and I'll tell you about Stonehouse.
Okay.
Where is that?
It's on page 51.
Okay.
And speaking of the bird,
okay.
Nothing in life is better than being free, but getting free is not luck.
Yeah, Stonehouse was just a kind of hermetic poet in the 13th century. And he left a lot of poems behind, quite a few. But he really stressed being on his own. He really stressed being on his own. And so, you know, this is just one short line. You know, red pine is.
This is Taste of Salt.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have your book there, maybe you could sort of take the reader through the story. You don't have to actually read the whole thing, but if you could just walk us through the story.
Well, let's see, a Taste of Salt. You know, there was a master. There's always a master and always a student, right? And the student was complaining quite a lot about how hard it was, how his life wasn't going well. And so the master said, well, come here. And he gave him a glass of water. And he put in a teaspoonful of salt. And so the student drank it and he spit it out. He says, that's just too salty. So later in the day, he took him to the lake. and he threw in the same tablespoon of salt. And he told the student, well, go ahead and go to the lake and get some water and drink it. And he says, how does it taste? And the student says, well, it tastes fresh. It's a lake. It tastes fresh. And so the teacher said, well, there, stop being a glass, start being a lake. Expand yourself so that life is what it is. So the pain of life is he said, the pain of life is the same. He said, it's like salt. So you can be like a lake or like a glass. And that's how you express it.
Nice. That's really, I like that. Good story. The next story this is the story that I really, really liked. This is sort of my favorite in the book. And it's The Archer. And the viewer can see that you actually painted an archer in there. I'm assuming the archer wasn't there at Yosemite when you were camping out.
And that painting is from Yosemite. That's Half Point, which is on the north side of the valley. And that looks out in the distance, that would be El Capitan. Then I found the story and the archer appeared. I put the archer into it. I had that painting for quite a while. When I read the story, I said, oh, I got to find a way to use this story because I liked it a lot.
So I'd like to talk about this story for a minute. What I found unusual was I couldn't at first tell whether, I suppose we should tell the story first.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll summarize it here.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So there was a samurai, a general, and he was tired of fighting, decided to retire. He went to a monastery. He was interested in archery. So he went to a monastery to study archery, and he stayed there for a number of years. He became very good. He was very pleased at how good he was. But the abbot, he wasn't buying any of this. He said, okay, you've learned all you can learn here. You have to leave. The general said, I want to stay here. And he says, you have to go. So he didn't know where to go. He'd been, on the road his whole life. So he decided to go back to his birth town. And as he got by, he started to see arrows in trees right in the center of bullseye. There was a target, bullseye, arrow in the middle. And as he got closer, he saw more of these. Target, bullseye, arrow in the middle. And he started to get aggravated about it. So when he got to the town, he said, who's this master archer? I want to take them on. So they said, well, go to the river. And at 3 o'clock, you can meet them. So he goes there, and 3 o'clock, there's only a little girl. And she's just puddling around. And she says to him, it looks like you're looking for something. He says, well, I'm looking for the master archer. I said, oh, the girl says, that would be me. And he says, you're the master archer? He says, if you're telling me the truth, then tell me how you get a perfect bullseye every time you shoot. And she laughed and she says, oh, that's pretty easy, she said. I just take my arrow and draw it back and shoot it. And wherever it lands, I draw a target around it. And then the general realized that why he was sent away from the monastery to learn this lesson.
Yeah. So what would you say the lesson is? I mean, I have my own ideas about it, but what do you think it is, or can't it be articulated?
Well, at best I could say is, what we're doing is all right. We just don't know it because, we're comparing it to some target that's already existing. And, we have to hit some pre-existing target. But really what it is our life manifests itself without comparison. Boom. That's sort of what I take from it.
Yeah, that's what I got too. I thought it was an interesting wrinkle that it's a young girl who's able to convey this teaching to him. At first, I thought, oh, they're setting her up to be kind of a comic figure against the master, but it's not really what's happening. She's really the teacher there, isn't she?
She's a teacher, and she likes what she's doing. It's in the stories that she just laughed. She was delighted to tell it. This is what she did for amusement. You know, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She just told him what she did. And he had a rigid idea of what a target is. The target.
Yeah, she's just there affirming what is.
Yeah.
It's a really nice story. This is an interesting painting, I thought, because I had to get past, to even see it, I had to sort of get past my reaction to it, which is, as people can see, it's a sequoia tree, and they've cut a tunnel through it. And then subsequently, the weakened tree fell over. And it's a sad tale about what human beings have done. And my first reaction was, that's horrible. What stupidity, what ignorance. And then I realized, oh, wait a second, I'm not able to fully be present with this because I'm having this really strong reaction. So it kind of worked on me on several levels. That's one of the reasons I'm putting it up, is because I had that initial response, which kind of deprived me of the full experience of being present with it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, this tree, these trees really reflect a different era when people thought we controlled the earth. John Muir has a quote. He says, "The wrong done to trees, wrongs of every sort, are done in the darkness of ignorance and misbelief."
Mm.
And what we're looking to do is to end ignorance. I mean, ignorance is really the source of a lot of our problems. This tree is in a different grove. It's not in Mariposa. And mercifully, this tree had already fallen before it had been painted. But, people like these, there used to be roads here. They made them so that people would come to visit and drive their cars. Cars are smaller then.
Yeah, you couldn't get an SUV through there. But in a way, by painting it, you gave the tree back some of its inherent dignity, kind of honoring the stump of that tree. It was a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize how sequoia trees, the roots only go down 20 feet.
Hmm.
And so they tip over pretty easily. And the reason you see them in groves is because they interlock their roots and it gives them a little more stability. That's why they tend to be. This one is off by itself, but in Mariposa in Yosemite, they're all together.
I have this slide, which I have as my last slide, and it's another favorite of mine. I think I like it so much because of the way it shows the striving and the freedom and how they're one thing in a way. There's so much freedom in the bird's flight, and of course, there's also effort.
There's effort just getting free. I think my wife wrote a poem on that one. Essentially, it's getting kicked out of the nest is kind of worth it.
Kind of worth it, yeah.
I don't have it here, but I'll see if I can find it here.
Is it in the book, the poem?
Yeah, it's there's a nice story to it, but I think it says, "Soaring through the clear blue sky, there is no regret at being kicked from the nest."
That's great.
And there's a story there. We don't need to go into it, but it's the bird in the cage story. If you'd like, I can.
That's the same bird in the cage story or a different one?
Yeah, it's the same bird in the cage.
Right. Nice. I'm going to go back so that people can see us. They see a bunch of elderly guys taking their glasses off and on.
Yeah, I have to, that's what happens.
So is there anything you wanted to add? Are you still painting every day, or do you go just when you're seeing your teacher, or
Today, I'm
do you
sorry,
paint, do you paint every day, or do you paint?
I paint about every other day. In the summer, I paint outside. It's a great reason to be outside, In the winter, I'll paint here at my desk. Usually my paintings are 9 by 12, and people, we have them hanging up. People ask for them, I just give them away. I'll give you one if you want.
Yeah, look one.
And so I've given them over 150 away. They're all over the country by this point. But a lot of people paint and they just get to stack. I'm happy to give them away because I don't want to see the old ones. But oddly enough, people have got them from years ago. I say, you want to upgrade? And they say, no, I like the one I got.
Well, I'll mention your contact information so that people can find you in case you have more you want to give away or they want to.
Yeah, they're welcome. You can give them, I don't know if I gave you I have a website where I have all my paintings, and, I don't keep track of which ones I give away, but if you pick 3 or 4, there's bound to be one there.
Tell us the website.
www.zenentrypoints.com.
And that's also the title of your book.
Yeah, my first book, I'll show you the cover here. Oh, there you go. Zen Entry Points. I wrote it a few, there you go. Is that backwards or just look backwards?
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zen Entry Points covers beginning meditation. The first couple chapters cover beginning meditation, and then there's some teaching, and then literature. And so it really, I wrote it because someone asked me to, and people have used it in book clubs. They've used it. It's most people like the first few chapters because I cover very, what's the word? When you begin a sitting practice, very predictable things happen, and they can put you off, and they're going to happen. But if if they're happening and you say, oh, it's happened to other people, then you can sort of work through it. And that's really what the first couple chapters are about. And then it goes into some Buddhist teachings and some literature. But I learned a lot from that book. It's not as accessible as the Sumi book, but people like it. Book clubs have liked it in the past. Yeah, that sort of thing. Well, or we have a number of groups, and very often people come and they say, read them instruction, and they say, this is the greatest. And we know that means we'll never see them again. Because their expectations are like, my work is done. Where, if you've sat a while, you realize that, you do it every day because there's always something there. You can never plumb depths. That's why you practice. There's always some new potentiality to become aware of and to express.
That's a good note to end on. And
Okay.
thanks for talking to us. And we'll in the postscript give people a little bit more information about you and where to contact you and find your books. So
I very much appreciated talking to you.
Thank you, Paul. I hope you enjoyed our visit with Paul Schubert. We welcome your comments if you'd like to give them at artintheemptybowl.wordpress.com. To learn more about Paul's work, visit his website at zenentrypoints.com. Art in the Empty Bowl is a project of Empty Bowl Zendo, which meets in Morristown, New Jersey. Our teachers are Roshi Ray Chichetti and Sensei Michelle Daniels. Empty Bowl Zendo meets on Tuesday evenings upstairs in the parish house of the Church of the Redeemer on South Street in Morristown, and holds various programs and retreats throughout the year. Please come and join us. Everyone is welcome.